Welcome to Time Luck Radio. I'm Gemini, and we'll be discussing big problems and simple helpers relative to digestion. Hello, Susan. Welcome back.
Hi, Gemini. I'm so glad to be here with you.
Thank you. We're looking forward to our next segment of digestive health.
Right. We're looking at digestion from start to finish. And we have finally gotten our food down into the small intestine. And digestion is pretty much completed. And we are moving into assimilation, the actual uptake of the nutrients. Now, the long and winding small intestine is certainly not as long as the small intestine of an herbivore, an animal that is designed to keep food in its body for a very long time because plant matter is so difficult to get nutrition from. We can clearly see by the pattern of our gut that we are designed for a mixed diet. We have neither the intensely short small intestine of a wolf, which is a carnivore and just eats raw meat. And because of that, raw meat is very, very quickly assimilated. It does not need to be in the body very long at all for the body to pick up what we need from it. And so the wolf has a very short small intestine and very quick transit time, whereas the herbivore has a very, very long small intestine and a long transit time. Keep the food in the body as long as possible to try to get the nutrition we can from it. Whereas our small intestine is kind of in the middle. We're capable of dealing with both animal products and vegetable products in our diets. I've heard some people say that meat just rots in the gut, and nothing could be further from the truth. Of course, if we think about it, it's already been subjected to enzymes in the stomach. It's been subjected to hydrochloric acid in the stomach. It's been bathed in enzymes by the liver and the pancreas and drenched in bile from the gallbladder. So there is certainly no way that anything that has been treated in that way could rot. Fermentation, well, sure, there's all kinds of bacteria that ferment things in the gut, but fermentation is a way to produce vitamins, and that's why our gut ferments. Technically, I'm told that we are considered hindgut fermenters because as the primary bacteria that do fermentation, we talked about flatulence last time, are in the hind part, or the back part of our small intestine. And one of the things that fascinates me is that where the small intestine ends and it joins up with the large intestine is an area where some pretty interesting things go on. And that area is in the lower right-hand quadrant of your pelvis. So if you put your right hand kind of where your leg comes up and meets your body, in that fold right there, you get the side of your hand there, and then press your hand up against your belly. That area is where the small intestine meets the large intestine. The end of the small intestine is called the ileum. The beginning of the large intestine is called the cecum, and that's the ileocecal area. And there's a valve there, the ileocecal valve. There's also the variform appendix, and variform literally means worm-like appendix that is stuck there. We think of it as a vestigial organ. We don't think it does any particular thing. And also, right there is a little kind of pouch of bacteria that, if there is indigestible fiber, and of course, indigestible means it has gotten all the way to the end of the small intestine and has not been digested, nothing has acted on it, then these bacteria get on it and ferment that indigestible fiber and create B vitamins from it. And really interesting area there. To me, it's one of the areas where we move from what the Chinese call building blood to what the Chinese call building qi. The small intestine, because it is where we can take the nutrients from the food and get them into the bloodstream, is said in Oriental theory to build blood. It's pretty straightforward. The large intestine, which modern Western medicine thinks of mostly as a dehydrator, just a place where all the food matter that we couldn't get anything out of goes to get turned back into a solid mass before being eliminated from the body. Remember, we have turned it into a liquid mass. And so that as it goes through the small intestine, it's a liquid. And then it's the primary objective of moving it through the large intestine, according to Western scientific ideas, is just to dehydrate it, to get that fluid back into the body, and to make a solid stool that is then passed from the body. And yet the Chinese have a very different take on this. They say that what the large intestine is doing is removing qi, or energy, from the food, and that the amount of nutrition in the food is going to determine how long the food stays in the small intestine, but the amount of energy in the food is going to determine how long the food stays in the large intestine. And in that kind of way that sometimes to a Western mind, the Eastern mind might seem topsy-turvy, the more energy that there is in the food, the less time it needs to stay in the large intestine. And the less energy there is in the food, the more time it needs to stay in the large intestine. But this relates very much to what we were just saying about the food and the nutritive value, that the longer something stays in the body, the more that we can get out of it. So when the qi, or the vitality of the food, is very low, it has a greater tendency to stay in the body a longer time. And while that's happening, of course, the large intestine is dehydrating it. So we begin to see that one of the problems that people complain about in terms of this part of digestion is constipation. And that one of the critical factors here that may be underlying constipation is that the foodstuffs that are being eaten are devitalized, that they literally do not carry enough life force energy in them for the body to be willing to move them along, and they get too dried out then from our trying to get food value from them. Just this past weekend, my group of Live Out apprentices were here, and one of them said, we've been studying with you for April, May, June, July, August, September, 6 months now, she says. And the first thing you introduced us to was to drink nourishing herbal infusions. And what you didn't say was that once we started drinking nourishing herbal infusions, we weren't going to have any digestive problems of any kind. We weren't going to be constipated. We weren't going to have any stomach pain, any issues with our guts. And I said, well, you're right. I didn't tell you that. She says, it's just amazing. And we didn't get into a long discussion because we were actually talking about a different theme. But what I would have told her if we had been able to talk about it longer was that this is, in part at least, due to the enormous vitality of the herbs that we use for our nourishing herbal infusions. And so when they get into the large intestine, this qi, this life force energy, is easily extracted, and then all of the food moves along through the large intestine in a much more, shall we say, smooth and easy manner. And thus we don't have to use any kind of laxative herbs, and there are a great many laxative herbs that are used in the heroic tradition to move food more rapidly through the large intestine. And unfortunately, many of those herbs are quite addictive. Cascara sagrada, senna are two herbs that modern herbalists hardly use at all because they're just considered to be too strong and too addictive. We were just talking in a previous show about yellow dock. And yellow dock, and what a wonderful liver-loving herb it is. And yellow dock is also considered one of the world's safest aids to anyone who has constipation. Yellow dock very gently and without any addictive quality just picks up the rate of peristalsis and helps people to move things then in a little faster manner. There are also, of course, bulk-producing laxatives, and plantain seed is one of the primary of those. They're sold as things like Metamucil. But yes, indeed, it truly is the husks and seeds of plantain, which grows in most people's lawns and is seeding right about now. So you could go out and you could harvest your own plantain seed. We love to harvest it. It's a seed of wild seeds, and I love having wild seeds in my diet. And I cook it in with like pancakes or muffins, or we cook it in with our oatmeal. I harvest quite a few wild seeds, and I really like the indigestible fiber that they bring me, so I know that I'm going to get a lot of B vitamins out of them. And I like the essential fatty acids that are found in the seeds. And, of course, having more bulk in the diet, again, makes sure that you are regular. And, of course, we could not touch upon constipation and things to help us deal with constipation without giving a hip, hip, hooray for the dried plum. And we have been asked by the plum farmers not to call their dried fruit prunes anymore, because they believe that prune is, a word that is a put down. Like you might say, you old prune, you. And so they prefer that their fruit be known as dried plums. Well, prunes or dried plums, whichever you want to call it. And the truth of the matter is that it is almost impossible to stay constipated if you have this aid in your diet. So however you want to go about doing it, as you know, my top recommendation is start drinking nourishing herbal infusions and don't worry about constipation. Or buy some dried plums or dried plum juice at your local supermarket, or use yellow dock tincture, or use a bulk-producing laxative. These are all excellent ways to help move that food mass through the large intestine and smoothly out through the other end. However, let's stop for a moment and look a little more deeply at what we're talking about with energy and qi. Now, in Chinese philosophy, it is said that the kidneys store qi. They store the life force, the vital energy. And when we are born, we are given a trust fund called Ancestral qi. So we are given a certain amount of life force or energy from our ancestors, which is stored in the kidneys. Now, the idea, as it is with any trust fund, is to invest wisely and live off the interest. Investing wisely means making excellent choices on food, like drinking nourishing herbal infusions, and being able to get the qi we need on a daily basis from the infusions we're drinking and the food we're eating. And thus we don't draw down ancestral qi. Why don't we want to draw down ancestral qi? Well, in this philosophy, when your ancestral qi is gone, you die. That is literally your life force. And so long as you're getting your life force energy on a daily basis from the food that you're eating, then you can live a long and healthy and happy life. Of course, into every life is going to be some trauma. There are always going to be times when we can't quite get everything we need on that day from the food. And yet, how much better it is to have it as a goal that the food that I eat on a daily basis will have enough vitality to feed my vital life force energy today. So once again, we begin to see how it is that having a goal, such as having a bowel movement every day, sometimes actually interferes with health. As a matter of fact, I often tease when people talk to me about constipation that so far as we know, no one has ever died of constipation. In fact, there's not a single human death ascribed to constipation. Although somebody said to me, well, it feels like I'm going to die. And yet the single biggest killer on this planet is diarrhea. More children die on a daily basis from diarrhea than from any other cause. And let's see, in Chinese medicine, diarrhea is defined as being more than one bowel movement a day, and constipation is defined as being less than 3 bowel movements a week. So I find that a great many people who claim that they're constipated somehow have bought into another myth about digestion, which is that we should, like babies, be having a bowel movement several times a day, sometimes even 3 or 4 times a day, certainly after every meal. That's not the way the human digestive system works. So if we're not having a bowel movement after every meal, well, it's probably okay. Now, there are a variety of pretty big problems that can arise as we are in the gut here, both the small intestine and the large intestine. Crohn's disease, for instance, ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, possibly food allergies arise here, diverticulitis. These are just some of the pretty big problems that can occur here. And I want us to remember slippery elm. We talked about slippery elm pretty early on in, I think, in our 4th show together. And you may want to go back and review that show. I also have a YouTube showing me making slippery elm balls, in which I take powdered slippery elm and I add honey to it until it's the consistency of pie dough. And then take pinch pieces off that, roll it into balls, roll it into slippery elm powder. And then we dissolve these slippery elm balls in our mouth very, very, very slowly. I have had people with these difficult, big problems tell me that slippery elm has been an absolute miracle in their lives. There are even people who claim that using slippery elm has cured some of these big problems. I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't really know except what they are saying to me. There is, however, an American medical doctor who is a specialist in gastroenterology, the gut, and he has been dealing with these big problems. And he had one of those kind of wild inspirations one day, and he thought, oh my goodness, I think I know what's causing these terrible problems in the gut. And it took a while, but he finally got permission to try out his idea. And so he very carefully selected what he wanted, and he put it in a capsule, and he gave it to his 10 sickest patients, shall we say, the patients who had the most ulcerative colitis, or the most irritable of irritable bowel syndromes, who had the croniest of Crohn's disease. And he gave them these capsules. And he said that 9 out of 10 of them completely recovered. The 10th one, who had ulcerative colitis, the ulcer broke through and caused a discharge of fecal matter into the abdominal cavity. It was not because of what was in his pill, however. It was just the progress of the disease. There was emergency surgery. And so he said, well, it certainly didn't work on that one. I hope that you're wondering, what did he give these people? It sounds like some miracle cure. Can I buy it at my local drugstore? Well, you can't buy it at your local drugstore, and you're going to go, yuck, when I tell you what's in the capsules. Because he, like I, in thinking about the human organism, realized that we are not designed to live alone, that we play host to a great variety of different organisms that live in and on us. And although some of them can be, shall we say, pathological, they can be disease-forming, the vast majority of them are really friendly to us and really help us. And so what he put in the capsule was pig whipworm eggs. And these people took this capsule, the eggs hatched, and they became infected with an intestinal parasite. And when they became infected with this intestinal parasite, then their immune systems and their guts stopped overreacting. We are not meant to live alone. I, unfortunately, am at the receiving end of trying to help people who've listened to some people who have some strange ideas. And so I have seen the damage that people do in believing that they have parasites and that they have to get rid of these parasites. And they often damage their digestive systems, and they can damage their digestive systems with far-reaching consequences. I'm also thinking about the people who think they might want to do a liver flush, and the hundreds of people who have lost a gallbladder. I personally know 100 people who've lost their gallbladder because they did a liver flush. And I have a good friend who says he knows easily another 200, if not 250 people who've lost their gallbladder to doing a liver flush. So we want to preserve the integrity of our digestive system and not to try to get rid of parasites and not to try to get rid of toxins and not to try to flush or cleanse anything, especially anything in the intestines. You know, we've been talking about slippery elm. And slippery elm, well, it really is slippery. And if you give somebody a capsule of slippery elm, well, it's going to combine with the fluid in the digestive system, and it's going to come out kind of like a piece of plastic or a piece of rubber. If in the same capsule with the slippery elm that you're giving to someone, if you put some iron supplement, well, iron supplement is very poorly digested by the human body. And so the vast majority of it is simply excreted, and it turns the bowel black. Turns the bowel movement black. So imagine, if you will, giving someone a capsule containing an iron supplement and slippery elm. What you're going to get out the other end will look like black tar. It will look like a black piece of plastic. And I've seen people given capsules containing these had been given a colonic and told that this is stuff that was stuck on your intestine, and the colonic dislodged it. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, putting water into the intestines is not a very good idea. In nurses' handbooks, it said that giving a single enema will disrupt digestion for at least 24 hours and sometimes 48 hours. Imagine what's happening to people who are getting high colonics. Major disruption to the intestines. Fortunately, it is only the large intestine, and so gut flora are preserved because they are primarily in the small intestine. But we do want to remind ourselves that the large intestine is not a place where food is rotting. It is not a place where there are pathogens or toxins that are going to kill us. And, you know, I don't remember if I've talked about the origin of that idea. And if I have, well, let's just listen to the story again, because it's a really important story. There was a Dutch man who is claimed that he discovered the microscope. And he was having quite the time. You know, we're all so, shall we say, microorganism savvy these days, that when I talk about bacteria or microorganisms, most people kind of nod their head and know what I'm talking about. Even if they can't, like, draw a picture of what a bacteria looks like, nonetheless, they know that there are these microscopic organisms. Well, of course, the person who invented the microscope had never seen any of these things before and was really having quite a time, you know, looking at all kinds of things and seeing this invisible world that the microscope brought to eye. And his friend, this microscope maker, Dutch microscope maker, had a friend who was a surgeon. And the surgeon was also fascinated by what was going on under this microscope and started bringing, you know, bits and pieces from surgery. Oh, let's see what this looks like. Let's see what this looks like. And one day came in with a piece of large intestine. Now, it took far too long, but it took a long time from between the time when this man looked in the microscope and said, odd things in the water. I wonder if they cause disease, to our actually accepting that these odd things could cause disease. But he was already kind of hot on the idea, although, as I say, it took a long time for it to be popularly accepted. And so when they took this piece of the large intestine and put it into the microscope and saw that it was teeming with bacteria and microorganisms, they, of course, immediately jumped to the wrong conclusion. And this surgeon proceeded to write a book of over 300 pages in which he said that the origin of all disease is the large intestine. and that obviously these bacteria were there because of the food rotting in the large intestine, and that the large intestine had to be washed and cleansed to keep this from happening. And the last chapter in the book, he looks ahead into the future, and he says, in the future, children will have their large intestine removed at birth, and thus will be freed from sickness and old age. Now, I know, Gemini, that you are just...
I'm aghast.
aghast, right? Or like, oh my gosh, and that many of our listeners are too. And yet, at the same time, think about how many people have bought into this idea that he promulgated, that all disease originates in the large intestine. And you have to just keep getting stuff out of the large intestine. You know, I was so taken by this idea of there being stuff stuck in the intestines, that I decided that I would ask medical professionals about it. And over a 10-year period, I asked close to 5,000 surgeons and surgical nurses who'd been present in the opening of the human large intestine and small intestine. I asked them if there was anything ever stuck on the intestines. And some of them laughed out loud at me, and some of them just kind of chuckled. And they explained to me that, no, of course, it was completely impossible for anything to ever be stuck on the intestine. And again, remember our very first talk when we were talking about the mucous surface that lines the digestive tract, all the way from the mouth, all the way down through the large intestine, and how rapidly a bite, if we bite the inside of our cheek, how rapidly that heals, and how the mucous surface is replaced every 24 hours. Well, think about it. It's like your digestive system is Teflon coated, and it gets a brand new Teflon coating every 24 hours. It's just slippery stuff in there. There's simply no way that anything could ever be stuck on it. Well, the heroic tradition, so bases its ideas on this, quite noted myth of the myth of the stagnation of the large intestine. And I was teaching in a yoga ashram once, and we were outside, and I was up on a little platform. The guru was there that night, lucky for me. And so there was a platform and all the incense and so on. And I started talking about the fact that nothing could ever be stuck on the large intestine or the small intestine. And just what I've been saying now, that this whole idea is a myth. And a woman sitting in the front row, who, unknown to me, was a professional colonic therapist, came up out of her seat and came for me. She looked like she was intent on killing me. I didn't know if she was going to scratch my eyes out or strangle me to death. But as I said, lucky for me, the guru was there that night with bodyguards, and the bodyguards took her out. So, wow. Yes, ideas can be dangerous, can't they?
Yes,
so we've
very charged, yes.
Yes, we have talked about some big diseases tonight, and we've talked about some simple solutions to these big diseases: slippery elm, to restore the integrity of the intestines, nourishing herbal infusions to get the body going with optimum nutrition there, and parasites. You can't just go to your local store and get them, but you're really, truly having a very big problem. You might want to think about it. I don't know the name of this gastroenterologist who's doing it, but I bet a savvy internet user could find him out pretty quick. And we'll be back next week to, shall we say, wrap it up and take our digestion right through to the end.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Gemini.
On behalf of Time Monk Radio, be well.